guys, I'm Elegant and welcome to another weekly Pokevlog. So this week the weirdest Pokemon game yet has been released, Learn with Pokemon Typing, so if you have that, please comment down below what you think about it, because it's kind of an odd game. But anyway, this week is going to be a vlog on sort of the prototype Pokemon, which I thank Pokecore for pointing out to me. He actually sent me a article on prototype Pokemon. So the reason I'm doing it this week and not any other week is because last week was the sort of Kanto spotlight, and I'm going to be doing the spotlights of each region after this. And the majority of prototype Pokemon sort of do fit in with the Kanto. They were prototypes for Kanto, but a few were prototypes for some later games, and the ones that were prototypes for later games are probably in the minority than compared to the ones for the Kanto. So I thought I'd kind of fit in between the Kanto region and all the other regions. So let's start with some very, very undeveloped and badly drawn Pokemon. So the first one here, you'll see a puppy dog thing, which I have no clue what it is. It's really, really odd. And below it, for some reason, the image below it completely changes. It looks nothing like the first one. I have no idea why that is. But it kind of looks like an electrode / coughing sort of thing. No idea why it's changed, and no idea why it's different. It's very odd Pokemon. So the second one on the screen now is sort of a creepy alien thing. I have no idea what this is either. Well, at least this one doesn't change. This one just stays with one sprite. And I must also say that you'll seem to like putting clouds around the Pokemon, because in the first one you will have seen the electro coughing thing sort of had clouds around it, which sort of made me think of coughing. And yeah, I have no idea what this is. It kind of reminds me of Anorith, but I have no clue what the clouds are for. I have no idea. But anyway, the next one is actually a pretty well-known image, and it's an image of a unknown Pokemon that we don't know. It's from like the Red, Blue and Green games, like prototype images, and it shows an egg, so the very first picture of an egg, which was kind of strange because eggs were only introduced in the second generation. And what the sort of the unknown Pokemon reminds me of is a Druddigon, which is the 5th generation, so I highly doubt it's a Druddigon, because Druddigons are very late and developed compared to this 1st generation Pokemon. So maybe it was just a random design. Maybe it's a Rhyhorn. It kind of reminds me of that sort of style. I'm not too sure, but anyway. The next one is a picture that kind of looks like a mix between like a Donkey Kong and a Godzilla. And ironically, the names are Godzillante and Gorillamo, or however you want me to pronounce that. And they are apparently Tyranitar and Slacking, which I find quite funny, that they decided to call them those names for one. And the images are rather humorous themselves. And the next image, called Dragon 4, yeah, literally called Dragon 4. And it's pretty much Charizard if you look at it. It just looks like Charizard. So, next we have a Fire, Water and Grass Pokemon. These were actually obtainable, or at least 2 of them are obtainable, in the Gold and Silver Alpha Demo versions. And I think the Fire Pokemon kind of looks like Raichu. And the Grass Pokemon has a leaf, but I think it kind of developed into Chikorita, because Chikorita has a kind of a leaf on its head. So I think that these must have been the prototype starters, which they completely changed for the actual starters, because they look nothing like the actual starters. But these must have been the Gold Silver prototype starters, and I think they kept the leaf for the grass type with Chikorita. Some people think it's Swaddle, but I must say the leaf does remind me of Chikorita, them being the grass type and fire, and water type remind me of starters as well. So the next one was released in Gen 2 beta images, but there was nothing like it. It's a sort of turtle thing, but there was nothing like it until the 5th generation, which was Tortuga. But it was kind of odd that they decided to put this into the prototype for the 2nd generation, because it does not look like any other Pokemon that was released at that point. It sort of fit in when it was a prototype Pokemon, but when they sort of developed it a bit more, it just didn't fit in, so that's maybe why they held it back until the 5th generation, when they could change it up a bit. There's no image for this Pokemon, but an interview with sort of the game designers and the Pokemon designers revealed that they were making a cloned sheep Pokemon. But this was actually rejected for the 1st generation of like the Red, Green and Blue games, probably because the cloned sheep called Dolly the Sheep, if you know about it, it was basically the first cloned sheep ever, was actually cloned in around the time of the games being released, and therefore it's quite a controversial issue. So the sheep was rejected for the first generation, and maybe put into the second generation. So what we could be sort of seeing here is that maybe Moreep was the originally cloned sheep, but there was nothing about it being a cloned sheep in the second generation. So the cloning would only fit in the first generation, because the first generation was all about the genetics and cloning, with like Mewtwo and Eevee evolving into different sort of forms. So some old artwork here, and even if you haven't seen this old artwork, you'll probably recognise it somewhat, because it kind of looks like the Gengar Nidorino scene that you see in the start of the Red, Blue, Green games and Fire Red and Leaf Green games. So like the intro, it kind of looks like that little battle at the start, which I'm assuming it was, because it kind of looks like Gengar, and the other Pokemon kind of looks like a mix between Nidorino and Feraligatr, which was probably changed to Nidorino after. But maybe it would have been Feraligatr, because I'm pretty sure that kind of was Feraligatr in an older form. So the next one we have is the Weedle evolutionary line, before it was changed. So this looks very odd if you are used to the Weedle evolutionary line. And the only reason we can tell it's the Weedle evolutionary line, because the first image looks like Weedle basically. They're very badly drawn, but you can tell that that was Weedle. They look very creepy. I'm glad they were changed. I'm very glad they were changed. It's kind of hard to tell what each of them are on the features, but if you look closely enough, you can kind of work it out. The Beedrill kind of reminds me of Lady Anne, so maybe Lady Anne was actually the remake of this Pokemon, but in a different sort of evolutionary set. So we now have Poliwag and Poliwrath / Poliwhirl. We can't tell whether the second one's Poliwrath or Poliwhirl. But strangely enough, what I want to point out is the Poliwrath / Poliwhirl has a crown on it, which totally reminds me of the King's Rock, because the King's Rock is a crown. And Poliwhirl actually evolves into Politoed with the King's Rock. So maybe that was a hint to sort of evolving into a Poliwhirl, or maybe some of the original ideas that they had for it. I'm not too sure, but that's quite interesting to see. So here I'm going to show some more prototype Pokemon images that don't really aren't really worth a mention individually. So you've got Chikorita, Ladybar, Marill, and Quillfish. So one you may know of though, one really interesting prototype is of Draftrig, who is actually the same on either side, and this is kind of a reference to its name. It fits with its name because the name is a palindrome, because if you have Draftrig and you turn it around, you get Draftrig. So that's basically what's up with his name, and I think that's why they made it like that. But unfortunately they sort of downgraded it, downgraded the backside and turned it into sort of a small head that is a sort of defense mechanism while Draftrig sleeps. Which is kind of sad, because I thought the double-headed Draftrig would be pretty cool. It looks pretty weird though, to be fair. Which is probably why they changed it. So now we have Torchic with ears, that kind of look like long wings, which looks crazy. But this evolves into Latiasiken, which is actually the dub name that people give it, because it actually looks like Latias / Blaziken, which is the weirdest thing ever. Probably the reason that it kind of looks like Latias and Blaziken is that the Torchic actually have wing ears, which probably made it into the sort of dragon thing that it does look like. So I'm glad they changed it, because this looks really weird, but it's probably because I'm used to it. The Latias / Blaziken, I don't really get. It's just odd. But the next one we have is Shellos. Shellos' prototype seems to combine the eastern body with the sort of the things coming off its body, the features of its body, with the colour and the head of the western version. So the reason that I think that this was made was because Shellos is actually meant originally for the third generation, and if it was put in third generation, it wouldn't have had the two different forms, so therefore they had decided to separate the two forms into two different Pokemon for the fourth generation. For some reason, I don't know why they didn't put it in third generation. Maybe it was too late or whatever, but that one does make sense. So here's Kakuna with arms, which is the weirdest thing ever. A lot of people thought this was sort of a sprite sprite error that they didn't do it right, but no, it's actually a prototype version of Kakuna with arms. It's quite odd. Yeah, that was actually changed a lot very late in production, and therefore it had arms, so it's a weird thing about that. So here's some early artwork for the first generation, and there seems to be a third female character in the sort of the game, as if there is a third playable character or a third main character in the main game, but there wasn't, which is the odd thing. And a third character was introduced in the third generation in the remakes with I don't know what she's called. I think she's called Leaf Green or something like that, but she was actually the second playable character, the female playable character. But it was odd that it wasn't introduced in the first generation, because it looks like from this that they were planning on introducing a female character, but for some reason it just didn't happen. But that's really it for all the weird and wacky prototype Pokemon. So let's move on to the question of the week. So this week's question of the week is, what do you think this prototype Pokemon is? I showed it you earlier on, and I said it looked like an Anorith, and one interesting thing you'd see about it is its Pokedex number is actually the same as Quillfish's, which we'll see in one of the bottom corners of the image. So yeah, tell me what you think this Pokemon is. It's really, really badly drawn and not much detail at all, but yeah, tell me what you think about it, and I want to say thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.